and welcome to another episode of PDA Dad UK. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about a controversial topic, and it's one that I've seen come up repeatedly, both on the group I run on Facebook for parents of autistic kids and in the wider community in general. And it's the issue of cure or cause for autism. And it's a big issue. It's one of these things that you often see come up, and it's something that's particularly prevalent in the United States. I just want to talk about it honestly from my perspective and what I've learnt and how my perspective has shifted over time. So a big thing that I've often talked about in episodes that I've done of this channel is that I take time to speak to autistic people. I have a number of autistic friends who are just amazing people, and I've come to really respect that amazingness about them. One of the things I really appreciate is when I see these guys who are using their autism to benefit their lives in one way or another. And I've spoken to my friend Em from Artie Boho, who makes jewelry but uses her hyperfocus as something that means that she can just focus in and do all this stuff and really hammer at it, and she produces amazing stuff, and it's really benefited her business. Likewise, Ben Oldroyd, who it was a fascinating conversation I had with him, and how he's taken his understanding of himself and he's applying that to helping other people with autism in a care capacity, and he's writing books on the subject and stuff like that. And it's amazing. These people are taking what a lot of the world sees as a negative and actually showing, no, this isn't a negative at all. In fact, you hear it, it sounds cheesy, but it's true. It's a superpower. And in the right situation, with the right application, these things become that superpower. They're things that I wish I could have. I wish I could have that hyperfocus, and I could actually sit down and just focus on one thing and shut the world out around me. It would be an incredible thing. Alas, I don't. But it's autism is an amazing thing. It's not something that needs to be cured. It shouldn't need to be cured. And it's one of these things that I've learned from talking to autistic people that is hugely offensive, because autism isn't like having a cold. It's not something that you get and you're like, oh, you wake up in the morning with a tickle in your throat and a runny nose and, oh, I've got autism today. I'll get rid of it in a few days, or just stay in bed or whatever. It doesn't work that way. Autism is an intrinsic part of you as a person. And I see this in my daughter so much. It is part of who she is. The way she processes the world around her is all seen through the lens of an autistic mind. It doesn't need to be cured. It doesn't need to be fixed. Now, there are challenges that come along with it. So her anxiety is something that we need to manage. Her meltdowns are something that we need to manage, and they're directly related to the anxiety. We talked about it in previous episodes. There are elements to her having autism that mean that this, they need to be managed. They're challenges that need to be managed. That doesn't mean the autism needs to be cured. I don't believe it can be. You can't change who a person is. Now, the way that this was best explained to me, and I've really been able to understand, is it's akin to saying to somebody who's in part of the LGBTQ community, you can be cured. Because for them, that's who they are. It's not something that needs to be addressed in a fashion that says that I'm going to change you from who you are. It's the same for autistic people. The best example is The X-Men. That was a film that really hit home for me. It was before I understood autism, before I'd had my daughter. The original X-Men movie was made. But, the subsequent, I think it was X-Men 2, they started looking at a cure for the mutant gene. And there was this sort of moment where this lad's sitting in the living room with his parents, and they realised he's a mutant. And they say, well, can't you just not be a mutant?
Have you tried not being a mutant?
It was like, how can you say that to someone? How can you just say to someone that a part of them that is intrinsically who they are is something that they, well, can't you just choose not to be that? You can't. Autism is something you're born with, not something you obtain over time, and it's not something that you take a pill and it goes away, and it shouldn't be that. And there are some very dangerous therapies around that attempt to do this, and I'm specifically talking about ABA therapies, which is applied behavioural analysis. Again, it's something that's very big in the United States. The charity Autism Speaks are big proponents for it, and it's why if you talk to the wider autistic community, you'll find out they hate Autism Speaks and they hate the puzzle piece because it's so closely associated with Autism Speaks. It's part of their logo, and it's a huge issue for the autistic community, and I understand why now. I've come to understand and appreciate the depth of that, what it does to you as a person to hear someone say you need to change that about yourself when it's something that's intrinsically who you are. It would be akin to someone saying to me, I've got a cure for baldness. It's just part of who I am. I've got no hair. The little hair I have came off. I figured if I'm going bald, it's going to all go under my terms and conditions. But that's just who I am. I'm bored. It's like saying music. I can cure you of your love for music. Why would I want someone to take music away from me? It's a joy in my life, and it makes me feel amazing. And I love hearing new music, and I love playing music, and I love writing songs, and I love everything about music. And I respect, just because I don't like country and western doesn't mean I don't appreciate the people who do. I don't have a problem with anybody who likes country and western because that's part of who they are. You can't change fundamental characteristics about a person. And when you say that autism is a curable thing, you're invalidating a massive part of the society. And the statistics on autism and how many people have autism now, and it's a big thing. Autism is everywhere. Not everybody is autistic, but almost every person I speak to will say, my nephew's autistic, or I've got a friend who's got an autistic child. I'm autistic. Everyone knows someone who is autistic. There's a line of belief that says it's the next step in evolution. It's the next stage of who we are as human beings. I don't know if that's true or not, but it speaks to just how ingrained this is into a person's characteristics. I watched a documentary by Stephen Fry where he talked about bipolar disorder. And bipolar disorder and autism are actually quite closely linked in different ways. But it was one of those things that he interviewed a whole host of people like Carrie Fisher, and he sat in these interviews and he was talking to people about the fact that people who are bipolar and famous, and because he himself is bipolar. And the question he asked repeatedly throughout to every person he spoke to was, if you had a switch and you could just turn your bipolar off, would you do it? And what really hit me was that not one person who was interviewed said, yep, absolutely. And Carrie Fisher was the one that really resonated with me because she was like, no, I love my voices. they keep me company. She learnt to manage her bipolar in a way, and she had bipolar affective disorder, in that she was hearing the voices. But they were part of who she was, and she wouldn't change that. And it's not something we should be looking to change. It's something we should be looking to support. And that's the big key. Learning to work with something is very different from trying to eradicate something. So things like ABA therapies, they're trying to eradicate things. So they're trying to repress traits, so important traits like stimming. And we've talked about stimming in a previous episode. Stimming is an intrinsically integral part of anxiety management for many autistic people. It may not be something that we all understand. It doesn't have to be. But to then say you can't stim is taking away a management tool, and the ramifications down the track for these kids is huge. And there are some very good, very easy to find if you just Google why I left ABA. There are a number of therapists now who are speaking out against it because they've seen the effects of ABA on their patients. And I'll put a link into the comments on one of those in particular, which I often share, because she saw down the track the impact that ABA was having on her patients and realised this isn't something I can do conscionably. And she got into it for the right reasons. She was trying to help. And the Star Wars adage, I guess, of, the path to the dark side is paved with good intentions. She had the good sense to be able to look and assess where she was at and go, oh, this isn't right, and therefore I've got to step away, and stopped her career at that point to move on and find something that was more supportive, but then became an outspoken advocate against ABA therapies. And it's likewise with cause talk, and cause talk is something that I understand is a natural thing, and there's part of me that you find yourself, your mind wondering sometimes. I wonder if it was this, is my daughter autistic because of this? Was it because of something that happened when she was in the womb? She lost her waters, was it because of that? We had a fairly traumatic childbirth. Was it because of that? No. Was it because she had her vaccinations? And that's the one that you hear just over and over again, scientifically completely disproven. And yet you'll hear people go on about it. The irony is now these are the people shouting out for a cure for COVID. But these things are scientifically disproven, convincingly so. And yet it's one of these myths that perpetuates, and it's just a horrible thing to think that something of who you are was caused by something that's a problem. And again, it comes back to my conversations with autistic people and them understand and being able to make me understand it's genetic anyway. And I've learned that in my life. The amount of parents out there who actually come to realise that they've got autistic traits themselves because they've been dealing with their kids and seeing patterns. I was talking to a guy today and he was saying, I'm convinced I must be autistic because I see it in my son. I see the things he's doing now are things I used to do when I was a kid. It's like, yeah, it makes sense. It's not something that you need to establish what's causing it, because it's not a problem. And that's the message that we're sending when we keep talking about cure and cause and what can be done about it and all that comes with it. It's not something that needs to be cured. It's not something that we need to blame on anything, because it's nothing that's a problem. It requires some support. It requires us being supportive of the people who have autism, who are autistic. And that's a key thing. They are autistic. They haven't got autism. They are autistic. And if we can adjust our minds to that understanding, then we're already a step ahead, because we're understanding that it's an intrinsic characteristic. It's an intrinsic part of an autistic person. They are autistic. And I don't want my daughter growing up in a world that thinks that she needs to be anybody but who she is. I don't want her to grow up in a world that's saying to her, you need to be a different person. Now, obviously, there are characteristics and there are traits within her condition that need to be dealt with and need to be supported in being able to overcome these things. So things like meltdowns, things like aggressive behaviours, things like swearing and carrying on and screaming and the things that are causing her distress in the end. And that's the big key. If I'm seeing that it's causing my daughter distress, it's something I need to pay attention to. But it's supporting her in that, learning to manage the more difficult and challenging side of being autistic, compared to trying to remove the autism from her. It's just not right, and it's not necessary, and it's not needed. It's not like a disease. It's not something that is going to, slowly eat away at your body like a cancer. It's not going to do that. It is simply a different way of being. And there are a lot of catchphrases that go around with this, you know, you hear it, and it's a different ability, not a disability. And that's so true. It's just a different way of processing the world. The more that we can understand autistic people, the better we're going to understand ourselves. And I've made it a big thing. I want to bridge the gap between myself as a neurotypical and people who are autistic, because I don't want my daughter growing up in a world that makes her think I'm trying to change who she is. I want her to trust me and be able to come to me and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, and I can support her and help her in whatever way. Because the tables will turn as well. There are things that she can do that I can't, and it may well be that, you know, I'm going to be able to sit there and go, hey, I'm really struggling with this. What would you advise? Because her mind works in a different way and can look at it from a different perspective. You know, the world's made up of so many different people with so many different gifts, different abilities, different strengths and different weaknesses. And the funny thing is that you put 4 people together with different strengths and abilities, and they become greater than the sum of their parts. So I'm going to use Voltron as my analogy here. Voltron is so cool. I grew up with Voltron. You know, the idea of these lion robots, and they join, and watching a Voltron episode is brilliant because it's almost the same routine every time. There's a threat, and they all go out in their relative robotic lions, and they try and fight, and they always sort of get to a point where they're losing, and then it's like, well, we need to unite, don't we? And they join forces as Voltron and become this amazing, massive robot and kick the asses of anyone around them. You know, they are so much stronger when they join together. If we, as people who are, for myself, who's a neurotypical person, for my daughter who's an autistic person, for, you know, all the people with different abilities, if we can actually join forces, my goodness, there's nothing we can't achieve. And that's the key. We are one human race, regardless of race, gender, sexuality, autistic, neurodiverse, neurotypical, whatever. We're human beings, and we all deserve that respect as a human being, and we all deserve that equality as a human being. That's all I want to sort of say on it, but it's just something that keeps coming up, and it's something that I just wanted to address from my perspective, I guess. As I say, it can be a controversial topic, but I honestly believe if we can just show the people around us that regardless of, you know, being autistic, being neurodiverse in any way, shape or form, being neurotypical, or being whatever they are, it doesn't make them less of a person. Just the opposite. It makes us all stronger. That's all I have to say. I'd love to hear any comments. Please do comment on this. If it's challenged you in any way, I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear from autistic people. If I've hit the mark, I'd really like to know if there's something I've said here that's not right, that isn't what you feel. If there's something that I can, you know, learn more from myself, I'd really appreciate that in the comments. Please do like this, please do subscribe, and I will talk to you next time.